Materials and textures are the second most important thing in 3D modelling. To put it simply, a texture is essentially an image that we place on a 3D model. A material is a little bit more complex, as it can take textures as a parameter, but materials can control things like the roughness, specular, metallic maps, etc. The brutal truth is, with materials and texturing in the 3D industry, it is an enormous topic. So in this video, I'm only going to tell you what you really need to know right now. But I will make another video in the future which goes into materials and textures in a lot more detail. So first of all, there are two main types of texture rendering systems in 3D software: PBR and non-PBR systems. PBR stands for physically based rendering, and what this does is that it basically helps the rendering system in a piece of software to understand the textures, materials and shaders on the screen a lot better, and also helps us get more interesting and realistic results. Both of these systems have their own set of texture maps. A texture map is essentially just a different way for the computer to read a texture. PBR rendering and non-PBR rendering have the following texture map types. But just to make things even harder, some software will have these named completely differently. For simplicity's sake, I am just going to go through some of the more common texture maps. Albedo maps, which can also be known as diffuse maps or color maps, are the main part of your texture setup. They basically provide the color for your material. Normal maps, which can also be known as bump maps, create fake lighting on your material, which can be used to create a slightly displaced look with bumps and dents. This is quite handy if you want to add more detail without adding more geometry. Opacity maps control the transparency of the material, and roughness controls the rough look of the material. If you reduce the roughness amount a lot, it can make the material appear glossy. So that was just a brief overview of texture maps and materials in general. It would be quite difficult to explain the entire world of materials to you just because there is so much to it. But let's now start moving on to materials in Blender. So let's play around with the material sliders a bit to give our monkey head here an interesting look. We can create a material for our monkey head by selecting it, and then coming to our materials pane here, and then selecting new. We can then rename our material. We'll just call it monkey head material. We can also expand this preview window to see what our material would look like on different types of objects. And then we have a whole load of sliders here. Luckily, you don't need to worry about most of them. Let's jump straight to the shading tab. I briefly covered this before, but this here is called the node editor, where we can create different shader nodes to give our material more complexity. By default, a material will have this setup. The material output is just the end node where all of the material information fits in and gives us our material calculations. But then we also have the principled BSDF node. This is just a node which holds a whole load of shader sliders together to give us a more streamlined workflow of our materials. So if I start adjusting some of these, you will see that our monkey head material changes. You can also connect other nodes to this to increase complexity. So I could add a mix RGB node by doing Shift A, or I can come up to this menu here, add, and then in the search bar, mix, and then we can select mix RGB. I'll connect the color output to the base color input of the BSDF node, and I can just put different colors in here and control the blend between both colors. I can also add a texture to this mesh. So you can either create an image texture node and then search for it, or you can literally take the texture from your file browser and just put it straight in to the node editor. And then we can connect the color output to this color input, for example. So this is just a brick texture that I'm using. So you can see it's applied the brick texture in there. I've also mentioned before that you can apply multiple materials to a mesh. So if I create a new material, clicking this plus icon here, it creates a new material slot here, and then I can do new to create a new material, and I can just call this second material. And then I could apply this to a certain amount of faces on this monkey head. So if I was in edit mode, and then I'm just clicking C and then scrolling my mouse wheel to bring up this circle where I can easily select a number of faces or vertices, and then you can come here and click assign, and it will basically assign that material which is selected to your selection in the 3D viewport. If you want to remove the material, you can just, with it selected, hit this minus icon here, and it will remove the material slot. It does not delete it, it just takes it off of this area here. You can access all of your materials through this material browser window here. So if I wanted to add it back, plus, I can come to the browser and second material. So that's it for this video on materials and textures. I will definitely do another video in the future which goes into much more detail on the world of materials and texturing. But for now, you are armed with enough knowledge of materials in Blender to create some cool designs. In the next video, we are going to discuss vertex groups and how we can use vertex groups to speed up our workflow.